welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber, and I am your host of this podcast and YouTube version of Being Well Informed. And we are happy to have a wonderful discussion that we will do today on being well informed. We have Patrick Sweeney of Every Library. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are so glad that you accepted our invitation to come on board and join us on this important topic of has book banning in America intensified? How would you answer that specific question?
Absolutely, it has.
Mm,
Absolutely, it has. Libraries were tracking, I mean, dozens, maybe up to 100 of book bans attempts a year, up until about 2021, and now we're tracking thousands. So,
thousands.
yeah, from from public libraries, school libraries, and even individuals who are trying to ban books from private companies like Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Wow.
hmm
Now tell us about your organization.
Yeah. So I am the political director of an organization called Every Library. Every Library is a 501c4 organization that helps support libraries in times of crisis, politically helps libraries win campaigns and elections, and then also help support libraries when there are initiatives like book banning or local initiatives to defund the library, those kinds of things.
How did this frenzy start about book banning? I mean, I know it dates back to the 1600s in the Pilgrim era, but that was
Yeah,
one book ban. But now
yeah,
the focus today is on book banning intensifying.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what caused the switch? I think um, a bunch of different things caused the switch, caused that switch to turn on. Primarily, I think that a number of national organizations who are very good at cultivating outrage for fundraising purposes have figured out that libraries are a very easy target. It's very, very easy to raise, $1 million off an email that goes out when you're telling everybody in your email that you're saving children from porn, when that isn't really the case. Um, but you just need one example, to send an email out, a fundraising email out, get your community outraged, have them all donate $5, and now you have a financial incentive to ban books. And that's really what we're seeing is this ban book initiative primarily benefits the organizations that are attempting to ban books financially and with political data, which is almost better than the money.
So you believe do you believe it started around 2020 before the pandemic, during the pandemic? What?
Yeah, I would say mid 2021. Mid 2021. Yeah, and we saw a couple of different things happen. We saw. I mean, the history of this is really going back to 2008, when we saw the recession happen. And out of the recession grew a number of Tea Party like anti government and anti tax groups and organizations who, of course, blamed the government, taxes, teachers, immigrants for the recession. But they got organized. They got themselves elected to small elected positions, school board, library board, those kinds of things. Um, and they were able to drum up uh, support through, of course, the use of outrage, the same way we're seeing today. And that developed into organizations eventually like Moms for Liberty, who are very good at it, and are raising significant money. And during the COVID, of course, we saw the whole discussion really ramp up, the anti-government discussion really ramp up because people were upset they had to wear masks or that their children had to wear masks. And so we got a lot of these school watchdog groups that formed suddenly. who figured out that they could not only form a watchdog group but raise money doing it, by going to school board meetings, protesting school boards, attacking librarians, attacking teachers. So I think it was a combination going all the way back to the recession with the initial crisis. And then also the fact that libraries stand for open access to information. I mean, that is
Hmm.
what libraries try to do, is provide as much information to as many Americans as possible and let Americans choose what is right for them and their family. Like they strongly stand against and opposition to government regulations over the books that Americans are allowed to access. Um, and 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 these organizations are, of course, trying to enact dozens of pieces of legislation that would govern the books that you and I are allowed to not just access in libraries, school libraries, but also, as we're seeing, they're turning on places like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and other private industries in order to control those books. So, this is ultimately about um, uh, the money and data piece, but it's also, they found a way to control access to information from Americans. So,
So this is not just a school library thing. This is
no,
also public library.
public libraries, private bookstores, yeah, you name it.
Legislation wise, what's going on in various jurisdictions?
Oh man. Well, right now there's a horrible bill that's going through in Missouri, which I don't have a lot of details on. It's just really coming out right now. But there's legislation being passed across the country, Utah, Kentucky, Wyoming. It's been proposed that librarians are criminally liable for the books on the shelves. And so if a member of the public disagrees about one of the books on the shelf, they can not just sue the library, but arrest the librarian. So instead of just simply going into a library and selecting a different book, their idea is that they are going to incarcerate librarians for the content of the books on the shelves, based upon this idea of obscenity, which has not been defined within the law. However, there is something called the Miller test,
Mhm.
which, if applied to reading materials or educational materials or any kind of media, if something passes the Miller test, it's not considered obscenity or pornographic. And in every case, or it isn't considered pornographic by the legal definition. And in every case that these books are being challenged, when they are held up to the Miller test, they pass the Miller test, and they're not held to be obscene or pornographic. So,
Then the Miller test refers to a decision.
yeah, yeah, it refers to a decision by the Supreme Court. It helps it's a set of guidelines that uh, you look at to determine if something is actual pornography. And I can't remember all the tenets of it, but I think there's
Hmm.
five. Um, that I think one of the most important ones is, taken as a whole, does the material um, uh, uh, uphold? How does it phrased? I'm totally blanking on how it's phrased, quite honestly.
Oh, okay, but that's all right. But
Yeah,
I mean, I'm thinking that there also is a definition of obscenity. And I'm thinking that also, and I don't have all of the factors that the
yeah.
Supreme Court at the top of my head, but I do know there is a decision that is out from from the U.S. Supreme Court that tests what is
Hmm.
pornography, what
And
is
that's called the Miller
obscenity.
test. Yeah.
And so the concern here though is not just that category of obscene and
Hmm.
pornography. You
Correct.
also have the banning of books that pertain to
Hmm.
LGBTQ issues and
Hmm.
also anti-CRT or CRT, critical
Yeah.
race theory.
Hmm.
So when you go into the direction of critical race theory, what specifically is being banned by these states?
Um, yeah, the critical race. So, I mean, this is the wild one, because there's what's being held up as critical race theory
Hmm.
uh, uh, is not. What's being held up under critical race theory is any book by or about people of color. And so we're seeing like the Yasmin series, which is about a young girl of color. And it's not, I mean, there's just about a young girl of color and her experiences as a children's book, and that's being banned. Um,
By which
uh,
state?
a couple of them, and we have a banned book database
Okay.
that I can send over that you can link people to.
And is that
Uh,
at the everylibrary.org website?
it's at the Every Library Institute website, which is our 501c3 organization.
Okay.
Yeah, and Every Library Institute, there's a press release in our blogs, but it's also under our research tab.
So this is a development that has started in, you mentioned 2021.
Hmm.
So in what ways has it intensified, and how do we stop it?
Yeah. So I don't think so. So the interesting thing is that I'm not sure that it will be stopped. I mean, we've never stopped book banning completely ever. And since the history of books, I'm sure they were banning tablets, and you know, cavemen were banning tablets at some point.
Hmm.
So I don't think stopping book banning is something that's going to happen. But what needs to happen is that this current epidemic of book banning, like we really need to have some real conversations with the public about the rights, the responsibilities of parents, and what that means, because a lot of this is falling underneath that parental rights heading that the GOP is currently pushing. Within the GOP platform now, there's a huge parental rights movement being pushed. But what we're seeing is that parental rights to the GOP seems to be, that parents have the right to govern other people's books, which is where we disagree. Um, you're more than welcome to regulate the books that you choose for you and your family. You as a parent absolutely have that right. You could always have conversations with your school library about the books that are appropriate for you and your children and your family. You could always have conversations with your teachers about that. You could, if you're in a public library, if there's a book that you don't feel is right for you and your family, you could simply, move over 1 inch and you'll find a different book that you might feel is right for you and your family. And I think all of that is part of the absolute responsibility of parents themselves. Where I think we cross the line is where we're enacting legislation that governs what other parents are allowed to choose for their own children.
Hmm.
When we're saying that no library in the country can have this book, no library in the state can have that book, no library in our community can have these books, you are taking away the choice of other parents. And anytime you take away choice, you're removing freedom. And if we're standing for liberty, if we're standing for parental rights, then we are actually eliminating parental rights, parental freedom, parental choice by getting rid of the books legislatively through the government.
Now, the legislature that you mentioned, that is attaching criminal penalties
Hmm.
to the book banning, is that only in Missouri, or are there other
No,
states
no, no,
following?
no, no. I mean, we've tracked it in dozens of states.
Mm.
This one you can find on every library's website. If you go legislation of concern, if you just Google every library legislation of concern, you'll find a link to all the legislation that we're tracking right now that does that.
That's terrible.
Hmm.
I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like it's spreading.
Hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, so and the reason again that it's spreading is because it's profitable. Um, they're raising significant money for right wing causes off the back of banning books, and they're adding thousands of Americans to their database and building data on voters based on um, petitions and those kinds of tools that you use in a campaign to build your email list and build your fundraising list and build your donor list. So, um, it's doing them a lot of good. Like there's that financial incentive to do it.
Well, one thing I also picked up on is how they are messaging this book
Hmm.
banning project.
Hmm.
For example, um, book banning is in the name of achieving academic success or
Hmm.
academic excellence.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, that message sounds very promising if you just look
Yeah,
at it alone.
yeah. We're at war with Eurasia. We were always at war with Eurasia. Like that is really some double speak. Uh, yeah, book banning leads to student success. Like that's never been proven to be the case ever. And in fact, the opposite has been proven to be the case. Children who are exposed to the the widest range of reading materials are more likely to achieve higher scores academically on standardized tests. They're more likely to be more literate than children who had access to less reading material, and they're less likely to they will earn significantly less throughout their lifetime due to that lack of literacy and exposure to reading materials. So, I mean, in every case, the data shows the more reading you give to kids, the more successful they are in life. So, I mean, there's absolutely nothing to back that up.
Wow. Well, you also provided us with some interesting points about every library. Go ahead and share what you have with us at this moment.
Um, I'm not 100% sure I understand that question.
Well, the slide presentation,
Oh,
about every library is up, and I just wanted you
yeah.
to assist me with
So
that.
this is actually a book banning presentation, and we're starting by talking about book banning. But we can talk about a couple of things that I think are really interesting from this slide deck. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that libraries, we aren't neutral. Like everybody wants to say, oh, we want libraries to be neutral. We want libraries to be
Mhm.
neutral. However, libraries do stand for things, and the number one thing that libraries stand for is the freedom to access information,
Yes.
free from government interference. And when you take any stand like that, it's a constitutional stand. It's literally libraries support the First Amendment, and so libraries can't not be neutral, um, because we do have a value system. The only time that somebody can be neutral is if they don't have a value system. So we got to get away from this idea that libraries are not neutral. We also have to get away from the libraries that libraries aren't political. 98% of library funding is excuse me, 98% of library funding is political in nature.
Mm.
90% of library funding comes from the will of the local voters and local legislators. 3 to 5% comes from the state. 3 to 5% comes from the national government. Only about 1 to 2% of library funding is philanthropic. The rest is political. So we are political organizations because we are government organizations. And we are political because, of course, we have a set of values that are backed by the US Constitution, which is political.
Now that's
But
interesting you said that because I'm thinking that a lot of people just assume libraries are nonpartisan.
so libraries are nonpartisan. Absolutely 100%. Libraries are nonpartisan. That is true. And this is where we lose some of the civics, in American education. Is there's a significant difference between partisanship in politics and
Mhm.
being political. You can be political without being partisan. You can be political without standing for Democrats, without standing for Republicans or Libertarians or your political party of choice. But so they're two different things. So libraries, we don't have a partisan value. We don't support the Democratic Party. We don't support the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party. We support the open access to information, which is a political idea.
Mm.
But even that is a nonpartisan issue because it's the Constitution of the United States. Like you can't, you know, like I you'd have to be against the U.S. Constitution uh, to be against libraries. So
Mhm.
yeah, and that's a very different conversation. So I keep talking about like the money and the data, And the reason that I talk about that is because what a lot of these organizations have figured out is that the thing that influences politics is people and money. And if
Mm,
you have people or money on your side, you can do terrifying things in any organization, in any country. People and money are what influences politics. You either have the people on your side or you have the money on your side. You can make campaign contributions. You can buy persuasive materials with money. You can hold rallies with people. You can contact your senator. You can do demonstrations. You can do all kinds of stuff with people to apply pressure to the political systems. But people and money are the only two things that really apply pressure to political systems outside of like military or violent force or whatever, like standard politics.
mhm,
But what is even more interesting than that, I think, is that you don't need a lot of the population to do this. So Erica Chenoweth was a researcher at Harvard who did an amazing study who found that it only takes 3.5% of the population to enable a movement and enable long-term changes. So if 3.5% of the population is engaged in a political initiative, that is, they're taking some sort of cohesive action, that that action throughout history has never really changed.
mm,
It's never failed to bring about change if you have 3.5% of the population. And of course, the bigger the so they're doing a lot of work around petitions. They get your name, your email address, your phone number. They're getting you as people into their database. They're adding that data to the voter file. They're knowing how to talk to you. They have data on hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of American voters that they're adding this data to, so they know how to talk to those voters, how to persuade those voters, how to get those voters to respond to their messaging. And unfortunately, libraries, they found that libraries are unarmed. Like we don't have data sets about who supports libraries and why. We
mhm,
don't have millions of dollars in advocacy money. We don't have huge messaging structures or
mhm,
giant media conglomerates behind libraries. We don't have any of that stuff. So, if I was looking to run a campaign where I was looking to raise money and identify people cheaply and easily, I'd go after an organization that was unarmed, like libraries. Libraries don't have any of the resources that they need in order to fight against political attacks. That makes them an easy target. That means that really banned books are just an opportunity. Banning books is an opportunity for a lot of these organizations and individuals to make names for themselves, to feel important, to raise money for themselves, pay themselves a solid salary, all that kind of stuff.
mm.
Um, and I think that's really the terrifying part, because these kinds of organizations are doing this work, but they're really enacting a lot of long-term changes,
Mhm,
enacting legislation that's
mhm. That's long
terrifying.
term. Yeah,
That's
that's long term,
definitely, yeah,
unless you get it repealed.
unless you get it repealed. I mean, but again, libraries don't have millions of dollars for the repeal process.
Mm,
I mean, I would love if every library was, we could do it as an organization. Every library could do all of this work. We would need to raise millions of dollars. Uh, and I mean tens of millions of dollars. So if any of your viewers are wealthy and would like to have a conversation with us about how we can put that money to work, fighting against book bans, and the data and the tools and the resources that we need, of course, we can always have that conversation. But um, uh, I do believe this is a significant crisis.
it sounds like it's way deeper than what we see in the newspaper every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
why I'm
absolutely.
trying to bring this to the surface through this podcast, to let people know how serious book banning is becoming and how much of a threat it is becoming to, I guess, the independence, I'm using that word, of libraries and
Mm-hmm.
their. I'm learning based on what you're sharing with us that libraries are just simply an easy target.
Just an easy, cheap target to make a lot of money from.
Mm,
And
mm,
kids aren't going to be able to access books. Americans, there's Libraries, more people visit libraries than they do. Before the recession in 2018, people went to libraries more than they went to the movies and professional sports combined.
Hmm.
Millions of Americans rely on libraries every single day to get the skills they need to advance their careers, to get resume help, application help, to help pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get back into the workforce. All those kinds of tools and resources are available in libraries. And people are going to lose out on all of that simply because a couple of organizations wanted to make some money off banning books.
Well, do you see this as serious a threat as, let's say, a national ban on abortion, a national ban on books?
I don't think those are comparable issues. Um, uh, yeah, I don't. I'm not. I wouldn't argue that those are really comparable issues.
Mhm.
But
You
I
just think
do
it's a
believe
few
that it's
states.
like crisis wise. I do think that banning books is hugely significant.
Well, yeah, I would say that too, especially if they have criminal penalties attached to
Yeah,
this. That's
absolutely. Yeah.
going way in the severe extreme direction.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Some states have attempted to enact bounties on books. So if you don't, so now there's a financial incentive to ban books too, in a number of states where every day that the book is on the shelf, who's ever attempting to ban the book, they can be rewarded with $10,000 a day for that book remaining on the shelf after they've asked for it to be reconsidered or asked for it to be banned or whatever. And so now, like, why wouldn't I, as a book banner, just run around demanding that books get removed?
Mm.
It's very preposterous, like very poorly thought out legislation, but it's being passed because it's profitable.
Now, there also is some frenzy going around where people will check out books that pertain to critical race theory and never
Hmm.
return them to the shelves. Have
Yeah,
you seen that in jurisdictions?
that doesn't happen as much as I think. It happened. So I was a librarian before I did this work, a lot in the Bay Area, and we were always finding books by or about LGBTQ authors or people of color tucked behind shelves and hidden away and checked out, not returned. I mean, theft is a big one of their tools, but I don't think it's as big as an issue as a lot of the media's made it out to be. Quite honestly, I think the
Now,
bigger issue, quite
mhm.
honestly, is that what the books that we're seeing, the books that we're seeing being held up as ones for banning, like, is to justify the other 1,600 books that are on the list of being banned. 1,600 different books are on the list of being banned. Only a small fraction of them, something like 20%, are by or about LGBT people or have any content that even mentions the word sex, right? So, and only one book is really being held up to justify all those other books, and that's, of course, Genderqueer, with 2 pages taken completely out of context in the book. Um, uh, what what we're actually seeing within those other 1,600 books that are being banned are books about things like seahorses. Like there's a Moms for Liberty woman in Michigan who was trying to ban a book about seahorses because it's indoctrination, because the male seahorse carries the eggs, and because there's a description of the seahorses wrapping their tails together. And there's video of, I'm not making that up. You can watch the video of her doing it. They also wanted to ban a book about Johnny Appleseed. They also wanted to ban a book about hurricanes because hurricanes are too scary for children. The woman who was running in Michigan, the insurgent who was running in Michigan, I'm totally blanking on her name, wanted to ban all books about divorce because children shouldn't have to learn about the horrors of divorce. But
Mm.
50% of American marriages end in divorce. I feel like children should probably learn how to deal with that.
Mhm.
Um, people can say, "Oh, we only want to ban books about porn. We're only doing it in public libraries, or we're only doing it in school libraries." But none of that is the case. We're seeing books about seahorses, Johnny Appleseed, books about divorce, books about hurricanes being swept up into this ban, and we're seeing seeing people try and sue private companies to keep books from being published or printed or sold. So like this isn't just school libraries. This isn't just public libraries. This isn't just quote unquote pornography, because almost like none of it is actually, by the Miller test, pornography even. So this really is just a money making,
What can we do as citizens
yeah,
to help your everylibrary.org organization along?
yeah. If you go to action.everylibrary.org /banning, you can sign the petition to help fight against book banning. You can make a donation to help us fight back. We're being outspent, millions of dollars. I mean, we need to raise significant money to collect the data, to build the tools, to get the activists, all the things that we're seeing on the other side. So it's really help us build so we can fight back. And if you have a book banning in your community, reach out to us and we can help you organize your local community. We provide pro bono support to local activists, data, funding, tools, all that. So.
And I thank you so much, Patrick Sweeney, for sharing so much information about book
Yeah,
banning in America. Thank you again.
thank you.